October 1944. A single American sniper climbs a tree in eastern France. Below him, 22 German armored vehicles, veteran crews, and a forest road that should have spelled certain victory for the enemy. By every rule of war, he should have been dead within minutes, but over 6 relentless hours, he turns the forest into a weapon, freezes an entire mechanized battalion, and leaves chaos in his wake all with 36 rounds and a rifle. How did one man make the impossible inevitable? Watch closely because what happens next defies history itself. Before we dive deeper, I have a question for you. How could a single sniper suspended in a tree, armed with only a rifle, stop an entire mechanized battalion in its tracks for 6 hours? Think about it. 22 tanks, dozens of soldiers, artillery ready to fire, and yet one man held them all at bay. Keep watching because somewhere in this story, you'll see exactly how he did it. Pay close attention because the answer isn't just about skill or luck, it's about something far more extraordinary. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. October 1944, 1637 hours, Eastern France. By every known rule of mechanized warfare, what happened next was impossible. A German armored spearhead 22 vehicles strong, led by veteran crews hardened in Poland and the steppes beyond the Dnieper, was advancing along a narrow forest road toward what their maps promised would be open country. Their objective lay 8 kilometers west. American units in the sector were reported shattered, retreating, disorganized. There was no reason to expect resistance. There was every reason to expect victory. The first shot did not sound dramatic. It did not echo like thunder. It was a sharp, efficient crack, almost administrative in its precision. The lead tank commander collapsed before his loader understood he was dead. For 17 seconds, the column continued rolling. They assumed he had crouched down. They assumed he had slipped. They assumed anything except the truth. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The truth was that 110 feet above the forest floor, lashed to the upper fork of a wind-twisted fir tree, an American sniper had just turned a paved forest road into a coffin. Corporal Elias Mercer had chosen that tree 3 nights earlier while retreating with the remnants of his infantry platoon. It was not a heroic decision. It was desperation shaped into geometry. The trunk leaned slightly over the road. The upper branches provided broken concealment. From that angle, he could see into Commander Hatch's. From the ground, he was invisible. No rational commander would attempt to fight armor alone with a bolt-action rifle. History insists this should have ended here. Mercer had 36 rounds of .30-06 ammunition. Below him rolled steel hulls mounting 75mm cannons, capable of turning his tree into splinters with a single shell. The wind was rising. The branch beneath his boots shifted with every gust. His thighs trembled from 3 hours of immobility. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Sap glued his sleeve to the bark. He had not eaten since dawn. Bellow engines idled. Confusion spread through the German column like a slow infection. The second shot came faster. This time, they knew. And in that instant, the forest stopped being scenery. It became a weapon. The battalion commander ordered a halt. He believed the threat was a platoon. He was wrong. October 1944, 1644 hours. The column should have withdrawn. That is what doctrine demanded. Unknown sniper. Restricted terrain, limited visibility. Pull back, deploy infantry screens, clear the flanks. Instead, pride intervened. The German battalion commander Oberstleutnant Karl Weichad spent 5 years watching armored momentum break weaker armies. Poland folded, France fractured. Even in Russia, speed had often been salvation. He believed in engines. He believed in shock. He did not believe in ghosts. By every rational calculation, if you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. One rifleman could not halt steel. Weiss ordered the half-tracks forward to deploy grenadiers into the tree line. Infantry spilled into the forest. Rifles raised, boots sinking into damp leaf mold. They searched for muzzle flash for disturbed branches. For breath, they were looking at ground level. Mercer was not on the ground. 110 feet above them, his world narrowed to angles and distance. He did not aim at helmets. He aimed at leadership. The third shot tore through the throat of a platoon sergeant waving men into formation. The fourth struck a radioman climbing from a vehicle to relay orders. Communication began to fracture. Below him, Mercer could see the subtle tightening of shoulders, the faster scanning of eyes. The forest was no longer passive terrain. It was hostile. Watching, he adjusted for wind. The fur swayed, his left calf cramped violently. He did not move, could not move. Any adjustment risked betraying the branch line. Sweat stung his eyes. He blinked it away and fired again. A machine gunner on the rear vehicle slumped sideways across his weapon before it ever fired a burst. By every known rule of warfare, suppression should have followed. The tanks should have saturated the treetops with high explosive shells. But here lay the commander's second mistake. Weiss still believed this was a delaying tactic by a larger American force. He feared revealing his own position to unseen artillery observers. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. He hesitated, and hesitation, in war, multiplies consequences. 17 minutes had passed since the first shot. 4 men were dead. No enemy had been seen. Weiss ordered flares fired into the canopy. Brilliant white light flooded the branches. For the first time, Mercer's outline risked exposure. The tree rocked violently as wind collided with flare heat. If they looked up now, everything would end. October 1944, 17:02 hours. The flare burst above the canopy like a second sun. White light cascaded through branches, stripping the forest of shadow. Every trunk cast a skeletal silhouette across the road. Every leaf seemed outlined in accusation. By every known rule of survival, Mercer should have been seen. He pressed himself tighter to the bark. The rope across his chest cut into his ribs. His right hand remained steady on the stock of his M1903, but his left had begun to tremble, not from fear, but from strain. He had been braced in that firing posture for nearly half an hour. Below him, grenadiers froze and looked up. This was the moment. A single upward glance at the correct angle would have revealed him. A dark seam against lighter sky, a human distortion where none belonged. But Weiss had made a third mistake. He assumed height meant vulnerability. Fire into the lower tree line, he ordered. Machine guns erupted not upward, but forward. Bark exploded at shoulder level. Branches at ground height disintegrated under sustained bursts. Leaves rained down like shredded paper. The upper canopy remained untouched. Mercer waited for the flare to fade. His breathing slowed into something mechanical. Inhale 4 seconds. Hold, exhale. When darkness reclaimed the branches, he moved, not much, just inches. Enough to shift the rifle through a gap in needles that had been too narrow before. He selected his next target carefully. The battalion's operations officer had climbed halfway from a command vehicle, binoculars raised, attempting to impose order on chaos. He was shouting into the forest, voice cracking with frustration. Mercer adjusted for distance. 160 yards crosswind from the west. He exhaled. The officer folded backward into the hatch, binoculars tumbling onto the road. Silence followed, not tactical silence. Psychological silence, the kind that spreads through men when they realize they are being hunted by something they cannot define. By every rational expectation, armor should dominate infantry. Instead, an entire mechanized column was stationary, bleeding leadership, paralyzed by elevation. Below, Weiss finally looked up. Not fully, just briefly. And in that fleeting glance, something unsettled him. The canopy was too still in one place. He ordered a Panzer to angle its main gun toward the treetops. The barrel began to rise. If that cannon fired, the shockwave alone could tear Mercer from the branch. The gunner requested range correction. Weiss hesitated, and that hesitation would cost him more than he understood. October 1944, 17:16 hours. The Panzer's barrel continued to rise. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Steel grinding against elevation gears echoed through the forest like the slow clearing of a throat before execution. The 75mm gun angled upward, not at a visible enemy, but at suspicion itself. By every known rule of combat, this was the moment the sniper dies. A single high explosive round into the canopy would not need precision. It would not need confirmation. The concussion alone would splinter wood, shear branches, and send whatever hid above crashing to the earth in pieces. Mercer saw the barrel align. He did not panic. Panic would waste seconds. Seconds were currency. He calculated. The gunner was guessing. No rangefinder could properly account for a target at that elevation without visual confirmation. The shell would be approximate. If he forced the crew to adjust again, he shifted targets. Not the commander, not the infantry below. The gunner, through the narrow slit of the turret optics, Mercer caught the faint movement of a face leaning into alignment. It was an impossible shot. A slit barely inches wide, light fading, wind increasing. History insists this should have failed. He steadied against the sway of the tree. The world narrowed to glass, steel, and breath. He fired. The shot struck the edge of the optic housing. Sparks burst outward. The gun barrel jerked violently off angle as the round ricocheted inward, shattering the gunner's eye socket. The Panzer fired anyway, but the shell screamed wide. It detonated 30 yards behind Mercer's tree, tearing apart empty branches and showering the forest floor in splinters. Shockwaves rippled through the canopy. The trunk shuddered. Mercer's teeth snapped together hard enough to taste blood. The rope bit deep into his ribs, the only thing preventing a fatal fall. Below, confusion turned to something darker. Fear. 6 vehicles now idled motionless. Infantry crouched without direction. Officers lay dead or wounded. Radios crackled with fragmented orders. By every rational measure, they still outnumbered him beyond reason. 22 armored vehicles, over 100 trained soldiers, against 1 man in a tree. And yet they were no longer advancing. Weiss climbed halfway from his command hatch, fury replacing disbelief. He began issuing rapid commands: redeploy, flank, encircle the forest perimeter. He had finally accepted the truth. This was not a platoon. This was a single marksman, and that realization made it personal. He ordered artillery support from a rear battery positioned 4 kilometers east. Estimated arrival 15 minutes. Mercer had expended 11 rounds, 5 remained 15 minutes until the forest would be erased. October 1944, 1724 hours, 15 minutes, that was the window between resistance and obliteration. The German artillery battery acknowledged the coordinates. Grid squares were confirmed, elevation plotted, high explosive shells prepared. By every known rule of warfare, no man remains in a fixed position under scheduled artillery fire. Mercer knew the pattern. 3 ranging shots, adjustment, then saturation. The forest would not survive. Neither would he. Below, Oberstleutnant Weiss had regained something resembling control. Infantry were spreading outward in a cautious arc, rifles angled upward now, scanning branches with new suspicion. A machine gun team dragged their weapon into a shallow ditch to gain a clearer angle into the canopy. They had learned. Too late, but they had learned. Mercer's muscles were beginning to fail him. His right shoulder burned with each breath. The bark had stripped skin from his cheek. A thin line of blood traced down into his collar. He had not moved from the fork of that tree in over 4 hours. By every rational calculation, he should have withdrawn after the first 3 kills. But withdrawal would mean descent. Descent meant exposure, and exposure meant death before he reached the ground. He made a decision no field manual would endorse. If artillery was coming, he would force them to reconsider firing it. He searched for the most valuable remaining target, not infantry, not machine gunners, fuel. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The lead supply Trukov concealed behind the 5th Panzer-carried reserve, jerrycans strapped along its sides. Ammunition crates were stacked in its rear bed. Mercer adjusted for the fading light. The wind had shifted slightly south. He fired once. The round punctured a fuel can. Liquid sprayed but did not ignite. He chambered another round, heart pounding now not from fear but urgency. Second shot, the spark came from friction metal striking metal inside the bed where ammunition shifted violently from the impact. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the truck became a fireball. The explosion ripped through the center of the column. Flames climbed 20 feet into the air. Ammunition began detonating inside the blaze, creating the illusion of small arms fire from within the inferno. Infantry dove for cover. Own Panzer reversed abruptly, colliding with the vehicle behind it. Smoke swallowed the road, and in that smoke, Weiss faced a new calculation. Artillery falling onto a burning ammunition truck would risk sympathetic detonation of his own armored vehicles. His radio operator looked to him for confirmation. Weiss hesitated, again. Above them, Mercer watched the column descend into chaos. He had 23 rounds left, and the artillery clock was still ticking. October 1944, 1733 hours. Smoke rolled across the forest road in thick, choking waves. The burning supply truck transformed the column into a silhouette of flickering steel and shadow. Ammunition cooked off in violent snaps. Fuel ran like liquid fire beneath treads. By every known rule of battlefield command, This was the moment to disengage. Instead, Oberstleutnant Weiss felt something far more dangerous than fear. Humiliation and armored battalionness. Battalion had been immobilized for nearly an hour by a single unseen rifleman. Officers were dead. Communications were fractured. Infantry morale was deteriorating by the minute. He could not retreat. Retreat would mean admitting that one American sniper had outmaneuvered German armor. History is filled with commanders who lost battles because they could not tolerate that thought. Weiss canceled the artillery strike. Then he issued an order that would seal the next phase of the nightmare advance. Slowly buttoned up, the Panzers sealed their hatches, periscopes narrowed their vision to slits, engines roared back to life through the smoke. If they could not find the sniper, they would crush the forest itself. Tracks chewed into the roadside embankments. One tank angled off the pavement, deliberately pushing into the tree line. Young trees snapped under its weight. Branches splintered. The machine gun in its coaxial mount began raking the canopy higher now. Mercer felt the shift immediately. Leaves disintegrated around him. Wood chips exploded near his face. One round tore through his sleeve, grazing flesh along his upper arm. Warm blood spread beneath his jacket. By every rational measure, this was the end. He could not outshoot blind suppression fire forever. He changed strategy. No longer hunting officers. Now hunting optics. The nearest Panzer's vision block flashed briefly as it adjusted angle. Mercer fired, the glass shattered inward. The tank halted abruptly, blind on one side. Another adjusted turret rotation to compensate. Mercer fired again. Second optic gone. The tank commander inside was now fighting through narrow auxiliary slits, nearly useless in smoke. Bellow infantry were losing cohesion. Some fired randomly into treetops, others crouched behind armor, unwilling to re-enter open ground. And yet the column still crept forward 5 meters. 10 meters, closing distance with Mercer's tree. The machine gun fire intensified. One round punched through the branch beneath his left boot. The wood cracked. His balance shifted violently. The rope caught him, but the branch began to split. If it gave way entirely, he would fall directly into the advancing armor. And this time, there would be no hesitation from Weiss. October 1944, 1741 hours. The branch split with a sound too loud to ignore. Wood fibers tore apart beneath Mercer's left boot. His body dropped 6 inches before the rope, snapped tight across his chest, crushing air from his lungs. For one terrible second, he dangled sideways against the trunk, rifle slipping from alignment. Below him, a Panzer's turret rotated. If the gunner saw the movement, it would be over. By every known rule of gravity, a man losing footing at that height does not recover cleanly. Mercer did not try to regain the branch. He abandoned it. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. And here is the answer to the question I asked earlier. Elias Mercer didn't just fire at targets, she turned the forest itself into a weapon. With patience, precision, and nerves forged in the impossible, he exploited elevation, angles, and timing to dismantle leadership, disable vehicles, and manipulate the battalion's fear. One man, one rifle, one forest, and he made the impossible inevitable. With one hand gripping bark and the other clutching the rifle sling, he shifted his weight fully into the rope harness he had improvised days earlier. It was never designed to hold him without foot support. It cut into muscle and bone, biting deep into his ribs. The broken branch finally gave way. It fell. 40 feet down, it crashed through lower limbs and struck the forest floor near the road. Every German eye turned toward the impact. They saw falling debris. They did not look high enough. Mercer swung slightly in the canopy, fighting nausea and pain. His boots searched for purchase and found none. He was now suspended against the trunk, legs braced only by friction. The Panzer directly below him advanced another 3 meters. Close enough that he could see mud packed between track teeth. Close enough that if he dropped anything, it would land on steel. He adjusted his body upward by inches, using the rope like a climber ascending a cliff face. Each movement sent white, hot pain through his chest. A machine gun burst tore past his right side, shredding bark inches from his hand. He steadied himself. If the column continued forward at this rate, they would pass beneath him entirely. Once beyond his firing arc, he would lose control of the road. And if they cleared the forest edge, the American defensive line 2 kilometers south would be flanked. This was never about survival. It was about delay. By every rational calculation, he had already achieved the impossible. Nearly 70 minutes. Multiple vehicles disabled. Leadership disrupted, but the column was moving again. Mercer pulled one final reserve from his discipline. He waited, not for movement, for exposure as the lead panzer crushed another sapling. Its commander cracked the hatch open a few inches, seeking clearer vision through smoke and shattered optics. Mercer centered the sight. He did not rush. He fired. The hatch snapped shut violently as the commander collapsed inside. The tank lurched sideways, colliding with the one behind it. The narrow road jammed engines roared uselessly against one another. For the first time, the column was physically locked in place, but the forest was growing darker. And darkness would change everything. October 1944, 17:58 hours. The light began to fail. Not suddenly, not dramatically. Just enough that distance became suggestion instead of certainty. Smoke from the burning truck mixed with descending dusk, turning the forest into layers of moving shadow. By every known rule of warfare, night favors movement. It favors armored withdrawal. It favors regrouping. But in this forest, night favored only one man. The German column was gridlocked. Two panzers were wedged nose to tail. One sat half, blind from shattered optics. Another idled at an angle, its commander dead inside the hatch. Infantry were crouched behind steel hulls, uncertain whether the greater danger lay above or in the trees around them. They still did not know where he was. Mercer's world narrowed further. Through the dimming scope, shapes blurred at the edges. His eyes burned from hours of strain. His right arm trembled uncontrollably now between shots. Blood from his grazed shoulder had dried stiff against his sleeve. He counted silently. 17 rounds remaining. Weiss made his fourth mistake. He ordered dismounted infantry to climb the trees. It was desperation disguised as initiative. Young grenadiers moved toward trunks with ropes and bayonets glancing upward into darkening branches. They believed the sniper must be within reachable height. They assumed no one would choose the top. Mercer watched the first soldier begin climbing a tree 15 yards to his right. If that man gained height, even accidentally, he might spot the silhouette against the last light of day. Mercer exhaled slowly. He did not aim at the climber. He aimed at the trunk beneath him. One shot. The bark exploded inches from the soldier's face. He lost grip and fell backward hard into the undergrowth. Panic spread instantly. They were not just being shot. They were being anticipated. Weiss, now operating from inside his armored hull, issued frantic commands over the radio. He demanded illumination rounds from the rear battery flares, not artillery. But illumination required coordination. Coordination required clear signals, and signals required intact communications. Mercer had already removed the radioman earlier in the engagement. Requests began to overlap. Orders contradicted one another. Engines revved, then died. Infantry shouted conflicting directions. One machine gun opened fire into a completely different section of forest. Convinced it had seen movement, they were fighting imagination now. And imagination is louder than bullets. Above them, Mercer adjusted his position slightly, just enough to brace against the trunk and prepare for the next shift. Because night did not end the danger. Night concealed it, and somewhere in the darkness, Weiss was making a final decision. October 1944, 18:16 hours. Darkness settled fully over the road. The last natural light drained from the canopy, leaving only the glow of the burning supply truck and the faint red slits of armored vision ports. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. By every known rule of warfare, armored units do not linger in constricted terrain after nightfall under sniper harassment. They withdraw, they reset, they survive. But Oberstleutnant Weiss no longer thought in terms of doctrine. He thought in terms of dominance. He issued a final order incendiary. If they could not see the sniper, they would erase concealment itself. Two half-tracks maneuvered as best they could within the jammed column. Infantry began preparing white phosphorus grenades and signal flares, intended not for illumination but ignition. They would set the forest alight. Mercer smelled it before he saw it, the sharp chemical edge riding the smoke. Fire in dry canopy spreads unpredictably. Wind shifts become lethal. Flames climb faster than men descend. By every rational measure, this was the true end. He had delayed them nearly 2 hours. He had crippled leadership, damaged vehicles, shattered morale, but fire does not negotiate. The first incendiary flare arced into the trees 50 yards down the line. It struck branches and erupted in violent white sparks. Flames licked outward. The second followed. Then a third. Heat began building in the upper canopy. Mercer assessed quickly. Descending now meant dropping into infantry who were actively scanning trunks. Remaining meant risking being consumed alive. He chose a third option. He shifted his aim to the rear, most Panzer the only vehicle with enough room to reverse fully. If that tank retreated, even slightly, it might create an opening in the jam if it panicked. The entire column could unravel. He steadied against rising thermal currents, fired. The round struck the commander's periscope, cracking it but not fully disabling it. Not enough. He chambered another. Below, Weiss ordered more incendiaries thrown deeper into the forest. Flames were spreading. Mercer aimed again this time at the exposed hinge of the rear tank's partially open hatch. He fired. The hatch slammed shut as the commander collapsed inward. Seconds later, the tank reversed abruptly too fast, too blind. Its rear track slid off the narrow embankment. The vehicle tilted, metal screamed. The Panzer rolled partially onto its side, blocking the only viable withdrawal path. The column was now trapped between fire and obstruction. Flames climbed higher. Smoke thickened. And for the first time that evening, German engines began shutting down. October 1944, 19:15 hours. The forest road was a graveyard masquerading as a battlefield. By every known rule of war, this column should have reached its objective hours ago. Instead, it was crippled, leaderless, and scattered among smoke, fire, and splintered wood. Mercer moved slowly between shadows and abandoned vehicles. The smell of burnt fuel and cordite stung his nostrils. Every creaking hull or popping timber made him flinch. He had not fired in the last few minutes, not because he didn't want to, but because the enemy had already lost cohesion. Dozens of soldiers were stranded on foot, many too terrified or injured to move. Some were gathering near the rear Panzer, desperately trying to right it against gravity and flames. Others crouched in shallow ditches, praying darkness concealed them from an invisible hunter. Mercer did not taunt them. He had not needed to. History insists that terror is its own weapon. He counted ammunition again, 7 rounds remaining. He knew the column would attempt to regroup at first light. The artillery that had been scheduled never fired. The battalion was crippled physically and mentally. Commanders were dead or blinded, radios were smashed, supply trucks destroyed, all because a single rifleman refused to leave a tree. By every rational measure, the war should have taken that road hours ago instead. It had stalled. And Mercer's mind had not yet registered relief. Only awareness acute and unrelenting of what he had survived and what could still happen before dawn. He began the slow trek back to his platoon's fallback, positioned 2 kilometers south, careful to remain in shadow, careful to avoid even the smallest silhouette against firelight. Below, the German survivors would remember the road forever. They would recount 6 hours of paralysis, of panic, of impossible losses, all inflicted by one invisible adversary. Mercer walked quietly past burning wreckage, past splintered trunks, past scattered bodies, and somewhere in the darkness, the forest waited, still lethal, still patient. October 1944, 1942 hours. By the time Mercer reached the American lines, night had swallowed the forest entirely. Smoke rose in ghostly columns from the ruined road. The column that had once moved with the inevitability of mechanized momentum was now a tangle of fire, twisted metal, and silent men. By every known rule of warfare, one man should never have delayed a battalion for 6 hours. One man should never have survived unscathed above a forest road filled with tanks, machine guns, and artillery threats. One man should never have turned chaos into a weapon of attrition with nothing but patience, a rope, and a rifle. But he had. Corporal Elias Mercer's name was whispered the next day among Americans in the sector. The Germans would later record strange sniper activity in after action. Reports ghostly, invisible, inexplicably effective. Tanks immobilized, leaders dead, infantry terrified, artillery canceled, retreat forced. The forest reclaimed the road slowly. Flames died. Smoke lifted. The silence of a battlefield no longer active was heavy and absolute. And somewhere beneath it, history recorded that this had been possible, not because of superior numbers or firepower, but because one man had made the rules of war bend around him. Every commander who studied the engagement afterward asked the same question: how could one man in a tree defeat an entire mechanized battalion? The answer was simple: precision, patience, nerves forged in the impossible, and a willingness to endure every conceivable danger without flinching. Elias Mercer walked away that night, exhausted, bloodied, broken in body, unbroken in mind. He left behind a road that should have been taken, a forest that should have been passed, and a battalion that should have advanced, and yet none of it happened. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe for more. History insists, some victories do not scale. Some heroes are unseen. Some battles are won not by overwhelming force, but by audacity tempered with deadly patience. The forest would heal, the tanks would be recovered. The men would return to duty. But the story of one man suspended in a Norway spruce, holding back an army for 6 hours, would linger far longer than any report or medal. The ghost sniper had struck, and for a brief, terrifying moment, he had made the impossible inevitable.